They call me the Prodigal Son. You're going to hear the story about me in just a moment. But as you do so, I invite you to let the Holy Spirit give you ears to hear this old story in new ways, the story of the prodigal son.
Jesus said, "A certain man had 2 sons. The younger son said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the inheritance.' Then the father divided the estate between them. Soon afterward, the younger son gathered everything together and took a trip to a land far away. There, he wasted his wealth through extravagant living. When he had used up his resources, a severe food shortage arose in that country, and he began to be in need. He hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into the fields to feed pigs. He longed to eat his fill from what the pigs ate, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired hands have more than enough food, but I'm starving to death? I will get up and go to my father. I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Take me on as one of your hired hands.' So he got up and went to his father. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was moved with compassion. His father ran to him, hugged him, and kissed him. Then his son said, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quickly, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Fetch the fatted calf and slaughter it. We must celebrate with feasting. Because this son of mine was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field. Coming in from the field, he approached the house and heard music and dancing. He called one of the servants and asked what was going on. The servant replied, 'Your brother has arrived, and your father has slaughtered the fatted calf because he received his son back safe and sound.' Then the older son was furious and didn't want to enter in, but his father came out and begged him. He answered to his father, 'Look, I've served all of these years, and I have never disobeyed your instruction. Yet you've never given me as much as a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when your son of yours returns, after gobbling up your estate on prostitutes, you slaughtered the fatted calf for him.' Then his father said, 'Son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours.' But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found."
And so in that story, did you hear the word prodigal? No. Don't use that much anymore. It means wasteful, to spend without counting the cost, to not care. So it's pretty tough to go through history known like that. I think you need to know a little bit about my backstory, and it all starts with my brother. That brother of mine, he would be your equivalent of the quarterback of the football team, the captain of the basketball team, the student council president, the homecoming king, and the valedictorian, all rolled into one. You try living with him. I was always his little brother. I could never measure up. Mom and Dad would always throw parties for him. My parties never seemed to at least match up in my memory, at least. So as I grew up, I continued acting up. I remember one time I got into an argument with him, and he was just laughing at me, and he turned and walked away, and I got so mad I picked up a rock and I threw it at him, hit him, and I started running. And that's sort of like the way I grew up. I always lashed out. I always tried to hurt because didn't they see that I was hurting? It was my way of getting attention. And I might have hurt my brother with the rock, but That's nothing compared with the way I hurt my dad, and I'm ashamed to admit that. I'm ashamed to admit how I came up to him one day and said, "Hey, I can't live here anymore. Why don't you just go ahead right now and give me what I deserve, my part of the inheritance, half of what you have. Come on, why don't you give it to me?" Now, I did that only to let him know how dissatisfied I was, that I wasn't getting what I deserved in this household, in this family. I didn't expect him to actually give it to me, but he did. He said, "Okay." I about fainted. A couple of days later, all the transactions were done, and he gives me this money. He gives me this money. So I take it and I say goodbye. I couldn't believe my good fortune. And, as they say, you know how well that worked out for me. I discovered the hard way what you all know, that when you're living for yourself, well, you'll get friends, but when the money runs out, they run off. And that's what they did. And when I hit bottom, I had no place else to go but home. And that was the last place I wanted to go. I couldn't even imagine what it would be like to go home, filthy, smelling like pigs, like the slop I threw at them, and to see my dad standing on that front porch just shaking his head. And he had a right to. But the thing I would hate most was the thought of going home and seeing that older brother of mine smirking at me every day for the rest of my life. So that's why I came up with my speech. I was going to say, "Father, I've sinned against heaven," because I broke the commandment about not honoring mother and father, "and against you. Just take me back as a servant." Truth be told, I wanted to be a servant because that way I could live in the servant's quarters and not have to be under the same roof with that smirking older brother of mine. So I was rehearsing my speech as I looked at the ground, walking home, when I heard some commotion in front of me, and it was my father. And I looked up just in time for him to almost tackle me with an embrace. He hugged me, and he was crying. And I stammered out my speech, but I couldn't even get to the part of being a servant before he said, "You're back. You're back. My son is back." And he was calling for the servants to give me some clean clothes and to prepare a party for me. He loved me after what I had done to him and to the family. I couldn't believe it. Well, you know that. The thing you might not know is something that's always puzzled me, and I never did ask him, why did he give me that money when he knew I might just blow it, which I did? Why? Could it be that all these centuries we've mislabeled that story? Maybe it shouldn't be about the prodigal son. Maybe it should be about the prodigal father.
I don't get a story named after me. I'm the elder brother in the story. No one really talks about my part. I'm not famous. I don't get the fancy title, and I've always just been in the shadows. And unlike my brother, I actually think that there is value in following the rules. It's not just a matter of respect, but a matter of character. Following the rules is the right thing to do, and to question them or our place in how things work in the law of God and in the family structure is not just unhelpful, but it might even be ungodly. The family is ordered one way for a reason. The law of God is laid out perfectly clear on these matters. So when you ask me why I resent my brother, I feel like that doesn't even warrant a response. He left. He left us after years of not even pulling his own weight. After years of him disrespecting our parents, asking questions that no one should really ask instead of accepting his place. And so then, after all of that, he basically writes our Father off as dead to him. When you ask for your inheritance early, what else could that possibly mean? You can't even wait until our Father lives a good and long life before you're going after his money? It's not yours. And the sense of entitlement, where does he get the sense of entitlement? So of course I'm angry, and of course I resent him. I have done everything that this family needed. I have gone above and beyond what was required of me to be a good son and a stellar example of one who follows the rules of the household and the law of God. And for what? I never got a party. I never even got a thank you. What is the point of me bending over backwards for you for all of this? To only find out when this son of yours returns home after squandering everything, that he gets a party? He gets to wear the family robe and the family ring, and he gets the good meat taken out. Where's my fattened calf? You've never even given me a goat. You've never called my friends together to celebrate what an amazing and outstanding child I have been to you. You left me in the fields doing all of the work while you were throwing him a party. I heard music and dancing from the distance. I found out that he came home from one of the servants. No one even bothered to tell me. So how about this, Dad? How about this, Father? You can keep your party. You can go in there and celebrate your favorite kid who has never listened to you. But I am not going in.
Oh my. I am the mother of these two. And although people have been discussing my family's business for centuries, I've been blessed with anonymity because my name doesn't show up in this sacred text that you study. You discuss my elder son, you discuss my younger son, you discuss my husband, their father, you even talk about what the servants say, and all the drama, as if you don't have any drama in your lives. Well, I'm not up here to defend my sons or to try and explain their behavior. I do not have to do that. I'm here to share some things with you about their father, my husband, that I think you need to understand. Our marriage was an arranged one, of course. And my father was proud of the deal he made with the man who would become my husband, this man I had never met, this man who was older than me, this man with land and livestock, a home and servants, this man who assured my father that I would be well taken care of. And I thought that was wonderful, but what I wanted to know is, what kind of man is he? And my father assured me that this man had a reputation of being a good man, a very good man. Well, as it turns out, this man I married, this stranger, is a good man, a very good man. Kind, generous, God-fearing, and deeply loving. Over the years, my dream was that my boys would grow up just like their father. My husband always adored our sons. It's interesting how different siblings can be, raised in the same home by the same parents. And yet, why does that surprise us? I grew up with a sister, and she and I are nothing alike. My sons are two very different people. Well, over the years, things did get out of hand, and I don't know how or when or if it could have been prevented. But when our younger son had the audacity to ask for his share of the inheritance, while his father, my husband, was still alive and breathing. I was appalled. But not my husband. My husband remained calm. I don't know how. And with his heart breaking, gave to our son what he requested and wished him well. Every day following the departure of our younger son, I would find my husband outside at different times, just gazing down the road, longing for, looking for, praying for the safe return of our younger son. Which is why when that day came, he saw him while he was still far off. Now, my husband could have responded in a variety of ways. With disgust, with rage, with reprimand, with rejection. It would have been a perfect opportunity for him to say, "How dare you show your face here again? Who do you think you are? You are no longer my son. You have no home here." And he would have been justified. But not my husband, not the father of my sons. Such compassion like you have never seen. This man ran down the road to meet our son, robes flying, so undignified, and then fully embraced this child, this broken, filthy, dirty, sick, and putrid-smelling son of ours. And if that wasn't enough, then he showered him with kisses. And in all the time I've known and loved this man, I've never seen him so happy. But in turn, this really hurt his older brother. I was the eldest growing up, and I think maybe I have a little bit of an idea of how he feels. His father's absolute reckless delight in the return of his younger brother is a kind of intense passion that our elder son has never experienced from his father. I can tell you without hesitation, his father loves him every bit as much as his younger sibling. Our eldest has simply never put his father and me through the fear of loss before, and for that we are eternally thankful. Sibling rivalry is a real thing. Who is favored? Who deserves to be loved the most? I think my eldest believes somehow that he has earned more love than his brother, and in a way, now he's looking for a payout. If both boys could only trust that there's just more than enough love for both. Neither hard work nor belligerence will change their father's heart toward them. Here in this home, there is abundant love for all.
So the parable of the prodigal son, one of Jesus' parables, is not to just kind of be taken on its own. Whenever we're looking at a parable that Jesus tells people, it's very important to consider the crowd with whom he is talking to, okay? Because it's always going to influence the story he tells. And when he tells the story, the parable of the prodigal son, it's actually part of a collection of parables. There's 3 parables in a row that are all about something being lost. And the final story, the big kind of kicker, is this story of the prodigal son. And so if you looked out in the crowd that day of who Jesus was talking to, the Gospel of Luke tells us that there was quite a mixed crowd. There was kind of average folk, and then there was like the opposite ends of the spectrum on both sides. There was a bunch of criminals and tax collectors and prostitutes and people that know how to have a good time. And then there was, on like the other end of the spectrum, there was some Pharisees. Now, Pharisees were a particular religious order. And the thing about the Pharisees that Jesus kind of had a problem with, that he struggled with and that other people struggled with, was that they tended to put the rules before people. They put the doctrine and the law ahead of like pastoral care needs. These were the same guys that gave Jesus a hard time for healing on the Sabbath, because if you worked on the Sabbath, you broke the rules, without maybe considering that healing someone may take precedent over that, right? So when Jesus tells the story of the prodigal son to this crowd, and he gets to the part about the elder brother, he's talking about the Pharisees. Those for whom following the rules is not only important, but for whom believe that their own religious piety means that they have a higher place in the eyes of God. When the prodigal comes home, the dad throws a party, and while the party is going on, we meet the elder brother. He's returning from work in the field and is told by a servant that his brother has returned home and his dad killed the fattened calf and threw a party. And then the elder brother refuses to go into the party. And the father even comes out to the elder brother to try to convince him to come in, which in that time period was vastly disrespectful. You never left a party that you were hosting. But the father couldn't imagine his elder son not being a part of that party, of that gathering, and of that good time. So the father goes out and tries to convince him. He says, I'm with you all of the time. You're with me all of the time. Everything that I have is yours. Literally everything that's left of the inheritance, all of it is yours. Can't you please come in? Your brother who was dead is alive. Come inside. And yet the heart of the elder brother does not budge, just like the Pharisees. I often wonder if the pious religious folk that I know are going to be greatly disappointed when they realize the kingdom of God is filled with addicts and criminals and prostitutes and people that are broken and messy like all of us, and a whole bunch of people we disagree with, and a whole bunch of people who have offended us. The religiously pious may follow the rules, sure. You go to church every Sunday. You don't use foul language. You treat your body like the temple it is, respecting God's creation. Each generation and culture has a list of what is supposedly acceptable as a person of faith. Each time period and culture within it has its own set of kind of rules on what good Christian folk can do or not do, right? As if following the rules can actually get us on the right side of God. Do we really believe that God will only extend grace to people with a particular lifestyle? Do we believe that we can somehow buy God's love, or that God could or should love us more than others? Is that really the kind of God that you want? You can't buy your parents' love, and you can't buy God's love. Not with good behavior, rule following, or piety. It's great to have a kid who does follow the rules, with whom you can trust the inheritance. You get to know that they're safe. You know that you're less likely to get that call in the middle of the night that they have been found in an alley or a ditch. The fate of the prodigal could have been terrible. But the father in this story loved his sons no matter what they did, no matter who they were. You know what's tragic about this story? Not that the prodigal wasted a bunch of money, but that by the end of the story, the eldest brother still refuses to come into the party. It is his own resentment and anger that keeps him out. Think about that. Jesus is telling this story to this mixed crowd of people, and he just ends it abruptly right there. He ends the parable with the elder brother standing outside, refusing to come in to the party, to the kingdom, to the gathering, as the father tries to convince him to please come in and join the feast.
About 12 years ago, I had the opportunity to lead a Bible study, a short-term Bible study, in which this story that we're looking at today was featured for one of the weeks. And there were probably 8 to 10 people in this Bible study, and I think probably most of them had more experience with the Bible than I did at that time. That's why we lead and not teach Bible study. And we'd been together a couple weeks. We'd gotten to know each other a little bit. And what we would have done at the beginning of the class is read the scripture first. And then following the curriculum, I asked a question from that I thought would be really interesting and start a great discussion. And the question was this: of the 3 main characters in this story, the younger son, the elder son, or the father, who do you most readily identify with? Okay, so I asked, we were in a table where we could all see each other, and I said, let's just go around and say which one we identify with, and after we've all had a chance to share that, then we'll go into discussion. Okay, fine. So we started with the person to the right of me. Elder son, okay? Elder son, elder son, elder son, elder son. Well, I have a couple of adult kids, and I'm kind of feeling it for that father. Okay. Elder son, elder son, elder son. We got to the woman sitting right next to me here, and she said, well, elder son, I've been in the church all my life. She said, when I was little, I was at worship and Sunday school every week. And when I was a youth, I was still involved. And when I went off to college, when everybody else falls away from the church, she said, I found a church in that college town and I went. She said, I married a Christian man. We married in the church. We continued to be involved and go to worship and have Bible study every week. Then we had children and we raised our children the same way I was raised, always at church. And she said, you want to know what bugs me? She said, when an adult who's never had anything to do with church can just all of a sudden find God, and bam, they're at the front of the line with me. And I hadn't shared yet. And I said, well, I don't know about being at the front of the line with you, but I am sitting next to you. I am the eldest child in my family that I was born into, and you don't have to be the eldest child to have great expectations put on you, but they were. And for the better part of my life, I wore the uniform of the elder child. I mean, frankly, I had everybody fooled. And on the inside, I was absolutely lost. I was absolutely lost. And at 39 years of age in this church, I found my faith, and it changed my life. So, here's what I want you to understand. I know that we are a church of largely elder sons, and that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. But you've got to understand that sprinkled all throughout, there are prodigals, and one of them is your pastor. I do think when it comes to God, we can feel like children competing for the attention of a parent. And when we come to feel competitive or deserving of more of God's love than the next person, that's a problem. When to simply be loved by God is not enough, when we have to be loved more, where do we end up? Well, angry, and on the outside of the celebration. And even then, never outside of the love of God.
The story of the prodigal son is unfinished. You'll note that we don't know if the older boy ever goes in, and we'll never know if the 2 kids are ever reconciled. It is up to the church to finish the parable. Behold the Father's house. The one link that we do know that's common thread in the parable is that the father goes out to invite both the younger son and the older son in. We are to be about keeping our doors open and going out and inviting the elder sons and daughters and the younger sons and daughters to come in, so that we might all reconcile. And the bigger the reconciliation, the bigger the celebration. That's our job. That's our joy. That's what we're about at Manchester United Methodist Church. We have that welcome statement that says that our doors are open to you. We have the commission to continue going out and welcoming in the older and the prodigal sons and daughters. The unfinished is but a concrete way we have of inviting the youth, inviting homebound, inviting people of different socioeconomic scales. You just fill in the blank. And that's why it's exciting. So we're going to have a time of reflection for a couple of minutes, and then we'll call for the ushers to come in and collect our offerings and our commitments to unfinished. But I invite you to do a couple of things in your mind during this reflective time. Number one, say thanks to God for God's invitation to you to be a part of this grace space. Because whether we're the prodigal or the older one, we all are invited by God to experience that grace that makes us one. So thank God for that. And also reflect on the people your commitments will touch. People who aren't here yet, but who will be invited through the doors of this church to experience that grace. And for them to discover, truly, there's no place like home.